What is going on, Coin Bureau fam? Welcome. Monday, absolutely pumped session got planned for you all. We have a lot to cover. I'm extremely excited despite all the market fear. You can see the title, you can see the thumbnail. I'm a little bit in a different position than probably most people at the moment in the way I'm interpreting the market, but I feel like that's a good thing. I feel like I come with a fresh perspective, but I'm excited. And as always, I really want to try and hit that 100 people, concurrent viewers, so then we can start doing some giveaways. So I'm quite excited. We're in for a massive session today. So let's just give everyone another minute or so, get everyone to jump in because I've got so much to cover. And we've got about half an hour or so to do so. So I want to smash out as much as possible. So before we even get into it, like I said, I'm going to be doing a giveaway this week. Now that means I need you guys to comment. I need you guys to like the post. I need you guys to like the video because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be pulling a winner from the comments. So if you are here, drop a like or a post in the comment sections because I want to see you guys in there. And then I'm also going to be pulling out one of the usernames from the comment section as well, because from there, I will then be posting it on my Instagram and my X account on who the lucky winner is. Now, giveaway, we're going to do 100 USDT. That was the original one. We bumped it up to 200 USDT. The moment we get 100 concurrent viewers, we are going to absolutely hammer it with giveaways. Now, I'm just checking on the other side of my screen here, but I do want to dive straight in because we have a heap to cover today. So without waiting any longer, we've got 36 people on the call. Let's jump straight into it. But beforehand, just a reminder, anything I share on this stream is not financial advice. It is my own personal opinion, my own education that I'd like to share with everyone, share my own experiences as well. You guys take from it what you will, make your own trading decisions, and make sure you guys, again, do your own research in every aspect. So, in saying that, you guys should be able to see me switching over to my screen now. Give me 1 second. There we go. So I want to cover off Bitcoin. Now, the first thing this week, you guys that have been following me now for a couple of weeks know that the main interest for me is the middle of this range between 65,700 and 67,700. I couldn't have made that more clear in the grand scheme of things, right? That is the thing that I am watching at the moment. Now, the way I look at this moving forward, and this is the part that I find quite interesting and the part that I really wanted to show you all. And like I said, I'm going to be showing you guys some stuff at the end of this. A couple of altcoins that I'm specifically focused on, a couple that I'm currently in trades with, and the way I see these playing out and how I'm going to strategize myself moving forward. But the big piece of the puzzle right now, and this is something that I was watching and something that I mentioned last week on Wednesday. I said, one of the biggest things I'm here right now is I'm not here to FOMO into the market. One of the biggest pieces that people are struggling with still is FOMO. And I'm like, yes, we're probably going to have this big green candle. We've got that. It went all the way to 70,000. By the time it came back down, we're now sitting around 66,000. Now that there is a typical retest of a morning star formation. You can see these big 3 candles here, 1, 2, 3, produced a really heavy and big morning star formation off the daily time frame. Now, what I'm particularly looking at is see this here, this wick, all the way down to 62,000, came all the way up to 65,000. To me, that tells me buying pressure within the market. And the scary thing is, I don't know if it's scary or I think it's a bit more excitement. That happened when this new war started. So despite the fact of prices crashing, by the time the end of the day came, price came straight back into this, I like to call it the equilibrium level, in between these two levels, 67,700 and 65,700. And basically price is now trending sideways throughout that. And this is where I start to get a little bit optimistic. And this is where I'm saying from this whole stream, I'm looking at this scenario quite differently to probably a number of your other traders and people that you're probably currently monitoring, right? So before I get into that, I want to make sure you guys like, comment. Like I said, I'm going to be pulling a winner from the comments this week. The moment we hit over 100 concurrent viewers, we are going to be doing giveaways. We are close. We're at 40. Last week we topped out at 93. I think today we could potentially break 100. I've got heaps to share, giveaways, some altcoins that I'm managing at the moment, and some exciting stuff that I'm going through. And I'm going to check the comments in a little while. But keeping this really, really simple, before I give you guys something that I've been monitoring for a couple of months now, and it's finally nearly here, and I'm excited. But firstly, this is what I'm watching for. And for those of you that are TA-based traders, technical analysis, that understand it, right? I've been monitoring this level on Bitcoin, and I continue to follow this point. I'm not the type of person who's going to come in here and give you 13 different scenarios every different week. I monitor this because I have some sort of conviction in what I'm doing. We've come back and we've tested this low. Done. We came back, we tested this low again, but we've produced a higher position. Great. We've also produced a new order zone at this position. Fantastic. I'm excited. Now, as we can see here, I'm looking at this play. This is what happened when the bomb started dropping across Iran. And this is why I made this a war update, because despite the fact of what's happened, Bitcoin has remained relatively stable currently. The reason I say currently is the US market has not opened yet. All right, we've got to be very clear on that. The US market has not opened yet. So I'm very conscious of where currently things are at. But when I'm looking at the charts, they're telling me one particular story. We've had this nice run up. Fantastic. We have now been consolidating. You can see here, Bitcoin itself has been consolidating. And I'm looking at this now, and I'm going, do we have a valid case now for a bull flag? If this bull flag was to break out, where could that move the market to? It brings us back to the top of this range, all right? The top of this range that has been at play since we initially tanked at the start of February. So my thought process here, let me share this with you. Bitcoin is down roughly 50%, we'll say. Hypothetically, we'll just round off to 50% from the $126,000 mark. Obviously, we've had a lot of global tensions. There's a lot of news with economics, all that sort of stuff. But do we think for a moment now that everything that has been predicted, everything that has been discussed, has now been essentially priced in the current situation? I'm personally leaning more towards being priced in. Straight out, being very open and honest. Now, I always had a target of Bitcoin of around 50,000. I spoke about that last week. I showed you guys why. But as it currently stands, the way I look at things is the market is continuously holding this $65,700 mark. So if this is the case, and despite what's happening, Bitcoin tanked, recovered within like a 12-hour period, and is now sitting at where we closed on Friday when the US market closed, I'm personally a little bit more optimistic. Now, don't get me wrong, the US market could open tonight and could absolutely shit the bed. Keeping it very, very simple. But I am starting to look at things rather differently. And I want to show you guys how I'm doing that, why I'm doing it. But before I dive into that, and before I dive into the juicy altcoins that everyone loves to see and the degen plays, all that sort of stuff, I want to break this down a little further. Because as it stems, I'm looking at this as a simple consolidation that has been taking effect since February. And yet again, Bitcoin is consolidating. And I do expect at this current point, I'm thinking we may break out to the top of the range. But like I said, this is unprecedented times, war zones, etc. Don't get me wrong. If this does not break out, then my next target will be back down to 63,000. But as it currently stands, I'm more focused towards the upside on Bitcoin. That's me sticking to my conviction. I don't get it right all the time. Let's be very clear. However, look at this on the weekly time frame. This is the part that I'm interested in. This is the part I've been following. And this is the part I've been monitoring, honestly, for a couple of months now. Now, let's delete this. So it makes it very clean, very easy to understand. But I'm focused on this section. Okay, we've got a 0.5 fib level. That's from a trend-based fib. Don't even have to worry about that. I'm keeping this very simple. I have been monitoring one of my favorite indicators for a very long time. That favorite indicator is the CCI. Now, not everyone uses the CCI. I made that clear last time. It's one of my go-tos. It helps me to predict pivots within the market, helps me to predict divergences within the market, in my opinion, a lot quicker than other indicators. But I'm looking at this right now, and we've got 51 concurrent viewers. We need another 49, and we're giving away some cash. So let's make sure we like and comment. Like I said at the start, if you guys missed it, make sure you comment on this stream, because if we hit 100, I'm pulling someone's username from the comments. I'm going to place that on my Instagram. I'm going to paste it on my socials, on my X, and that person there is going to shoot me a message. Prove to me, obviously, that it's your username. I'm not going to get 10 different people messaging me, that's my username. And I'm going to deposit you 100 USDT. But that was the original plan. We're actually going to be doing 200 USDT. So we're nearly there. We're at 54. Let's go. So make sure you comment, make sure you like. That's going to get your eligibility in, and then we can rumble. But going back to this section here, I'm most concerned with. And when I say concerned in a good way. All right. I'm looking at the CCI indicator at the moment, because the way this represents data is a deep retracement on the CCI into the negative 300 mark on the weekly represents a severely oversold situation. Now, despite the fact that price coming down lower and candles closing lower, you can see that here, the selling pressure is actually a lot less when you compare it historically. So what is that telling me? That is telling me potentially that sellers are getting exhausted. That's potentially telling me that buyers are starting to somewhat step into the market. People are starting to see this as potentially an area of interest. Now, this again is my interpretation, and I make that quite clear. I'm not here to sell you guys a pipe dream or anything like that. I'm showing you guys from an analysis perspective. Whilst the market is so risk adverse at the moment, and you have this massive narrative around what is going on, I'm really, really focused on the fact of what the data is telling me, because I want to position myself of what's going to come in the future. We've seen how fast this war has escalated. We've seen how fast the markets have dropped historically. I'm not expecting Bitcoin right now to just all of a sudden tank to 50K. I'm actually looking at this. Is there a possibility right now for a potential retracement? If this bull flag plays out in the 4-hour back to 71K, if Bitcoin takes 71K out, then there's a large CME gap that is still yet to be filled around the 83K zone. So that is sort of where I'm watching at the moment, because that there tells me if we can break up off what could be potentially now a bullish divergence play coming into effect, the market comes back and takes out this range of 71,000, then above 71,000 from this point on, there's a large CME gap sitting around 80. It'll also retest the breakout that took effect of this megaphone pattern. So I've got a couple of things at play here. Some people thought I was crazy when I thought Bitcoin was going to 68,000. It went directly to 68,000. It's held around there since the 200 EMA is sitting there. But I'm looking at that point now and going, hey, if we can start to break above this region again, off some bullish divergence, I want to see this fully pivot, fully close the gap, right? That'll come through from this week. And then I'm going, okay, well, I'm thinking like a local bottom is in for the time being. Now, tell me if I'm crazy. Tell me in the comments if you think I'm crazy, given the current situation. You're more than welcome to. I'll accept it. But I'm strategic. I want to look at what the potentials are. Not that, oh my God, it's all over, Bitcoin's crashing, all the global markets are going to crash, yada, yada, yada. Asia's opened. The London market has been open. The US market opens now in 2 hours and 15 minutes. Pre-market a little earlier, obviously, an hour and 15 minutes. But I'm watching this at the moment and I'm thinking, I'm not as negative, I'm not as bearish as what probably a lot of other people are at this point in time. I'm actually quite optimistic given the current situation. And I think off these levels, and I'm going to show you guys some altcoins very, very shortly, how they're also positioning themselves over the last couple of weeks what they look like at the bottoms of these lows, because to me, they're actually holding up relatively well given the grand scheme of things. Again, tell me if I'm crazy, you're more than welcome to, but I'm excited given this current point in which we are at. So let's jump into some alts. Before we do that, I want to show you guys this on the US 500. For many of you that don't know, I monitor the US 500 very, very closely in comparison to Bitcoin. Because of the fact you can see this, it's very, very obvious, right? US 500 dumps, it gets the run, it's kicked off multiple bull markets, right? That's just the data. I'm not there to tell you otherwise. It's just clearly when you mark it out, you compare this to Bitcoin, they run side by side. Now, if you go back into the daily time frame on this, whilst Bitcoin has been at these lows, what has also been happening to this? It's been consolidating. Now stick with me here. This consolidation is starting to be rather interesting because we're starting to get a little liquidity grab. We've developed a nice order zone at the bottom of the US 500 as well in where it's currently at. So I like to call Mondays fake move Mondays because as it stands, the US 500 is down nearly a full percentage point, but the US market isn't open yet. So we'll see where this lands when the market actually opens. Does it crash land or does this represent a bit of an opportunity for buying? We'll wait and see. But I just wanted to shed some light on this one because last week I made some really good plays, again, on the stock market, completely different scenario. We're not going to go into that. But if you follow into my socials, you'll see it all there. But in the grand scheme of things, I want to show you guys the same tokens or similar tokens and a couple of others of what I'm monitoring. And I'm going to tell you why, especially after last week and where these are currently sitting. Now, before I jump into that, we're just about to hit 60 concurrent viewers. Remember, if we hit 100, we're doing the giveaways, 200 USDT. I'm going to be pulling that from the comment section. So make sure you're commenting, spam those comments, like it. I'm going to then choose a username from the comments, post it on my socials. So make sure you're following my socials. And that person there is going to get 200 USDT airdrop directly into their wallet. No strings attached. Happy days. Now, before I jump into the alts, I want to give you guys a bit of justification as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. If you look at this, this is the phases of the money flow, right? I call this in my own little personal cheat sheet. But I typically look at things at Bitcoin. I then look at things like Ethereum, and then I'm looking at alt caps. I'm not looking at an alt season. I'll make that very clear. Me looking at alts does not look at an altcoin season. It does not look at me playing around with degen coins. I'm not looking at things like meme coins or Pepe or pump.fun. Like, I don't care about those, as I call them, shit coins. I'm looking at your large caps because I go, if Bitcoin can hold itself, the next flow on effect will go to Ethereum and will then go to the large caps. So I just wanted to break this down for you first because this is where I'm watching for. Now, going into things, I'm going to jump into the alts. I just want to check the comments, how we're going there. All right, we're going off. Good stuff, guys. Mate, there is not enough people commenting. Considering we're doing giveaways, if your username is not in those comments, you're not going to be eligible for the giveaway. So if there's 10 people commenting, it's going to be a 1 in 10 chance. So I would say get that ball moving. But jumping into this, I want to show you guys something on Solana at the moment. This is where my interest lies, on things like this. I'm going to show you guys why. This level here continues to hold this weekly order zone that I've been focused on. Again, starting to see some bullish divergence, pivots starting to occur. Now, the daily time frame. This is where I'm more focused on. A lot of people don't realize this, but what has been happening during all this sentiment of fear, whilst the war is occurring, whilst Bitcoin has been tanking, we have sideways accumulation. We then also have a big green candle that is punched up, demonstrated buyer's strength. We've then had a retracement. But one of my favorites, the Morningstar retest. You can see, we drive this down. We can test it from here. We can test it from here. On Bitcoin, it's sitting at the 618. On this one here, again, around the 618, around the 707 level. The wicks, to me, represent buying pressure at this current point. So people, people are seeing value in this current scheme of where price is at. So if I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this as a standard accumulation phase, right? I can remove this to make it a little easier to see. But to me, that looks like some simple sideways action. And I'm looking at this going, I've even purchased around this region. I've made that clear. I purchased a bag of Solana. I'm also running some leverage positions, right? I'm running some leverage positions, but I'm running them quite differently compared to the standard. And I'm running them based upon the fact that I can DCA entries if required, because one of the big things that people aren't going to realize right now is it's going to be, and I want to just make this really clear, I think it's going to be extremely hard for anyone in the current circumstance to pick the bottom out of the market. Now, you'll get influencers telling you otherwise. They'll be telling you that they know when the bull market starts, they know when the bear market begins, and blah, 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 blah. The reality is, let's say 99% of traders use a random number, would never pick the exact bottom. And I personally don't have the time to sit there in front of the charts for 5 hours a day, hoping that the market's going to go up and pick the bottom out of it. And probably 90% of you on this stream right now also in the same position where you're not going to sit in front of the charts for 5 hours a day watching every single candle. So at the moment, I'm looking at leveraged positions that I can DCA into. Doesn't mean that I'm buying the bottom all of a sudden and I'm unloading all my capital. That is not the message. That is not my intent. That is not what I'm doing currently. I am looking at a more risk-on environment personally, but I'm doing it in my way that I think is smart in my own experiences, i.e. I'm using lower leverage, I'm using small percentages of my account that I can then DCA into, even if the market dropped 10, 20% from where it is. I could DCA still entries and I still would not be in a bad position. But I'm looking at ways in which I believe, hey, if this does reverse quite fast and doesn't affect the way we're anticipating, I want to be on the other side of the spectrum for what could potentially take effect. So in that sense, I'm playing smart with my risk. You know, sometimes I'll risk 1% of my account, 2%, 3%. In current scenarios, I'm risking like 0.3, 0.4% with the opportunity to DCA into these entries that'll probably bring my average entry into like 1.5% of my account balance. Now, some of you guys think 1.5% is not much. Now, look, once you start having a larger account balance, you don't need to deploy tens of thousands, $20,000, $100,000 onto positions. I'm not here trying to scheme the market. I'm not here trying to present the fact that, you know, I unload millions onto the market. It's not true. I like to make money out of the market. I like to secure profit. I like to bag that profit. I love to live life on my own terms. And that's what I currently do. And I travel around the world. I meet great people and I have a really fun time doing it while I'm building some really, really great stuff about it. So in this situation, I'm being very smart with my capital. I'm going to take some entries. I'm running them on what's called inverse perpetuals or CoinM futures, depending on what exchange you're using. I've got a couple of exchanges in my description, so you can trade them on the same things. You can use them. But I'm looking at these because if the market runs, and I'll give you guys an example here, if the market runs on Solana, for instance, and price rallies from this point, goes up, say, 18%, let's say I'm running this on 10x leverage to make it simple, and it runs 180% in total, I'm going to be being paid out in Solana tokens, not USDT, because I want to capitalize on the fact if this market runs, then I want to be paid out in the tokens that I'm trading, not USDT in this particular time. I trade for USDT when I'm in a bearish sentiment. If I'm looking to take long positions and a bit more conviction in my analysis, I want to get paid out in the token that I'm trading. Again, if you don't know what that is, guys, don't just ape in and start doing it. Please learn it properly. It's not something that you should just play around with. Now, jumping into my next altcoin. Link is the other one I've been quite vocal on. Again, similar sort of scenario. I'll show you guys this. Sideways action. Again, consolidating at the bottom of the range, putting a big green candle, demonstrated some buyer strength, and is now sitting at the middle of the range. I'm looking to see where this lands. Again, guys, I'm just focused on these consolidation patterns at the moment. I'm not trying to pick the bottom of like Pepe. You look at Pepe right now, and it's just been tanking, and now it's putting in another low. I'm looking at tokens of the larger caps. I'm focused on these bad boys, and I'm looking at them from the fact of, are they consolidating at the bottom of the ranges? This is where my focus is. I've sort of mentioned a couple of others, right? MMNT, I mentioned that last week, but I want to show you guys one other one that I've been focused on as well, is DOT. Now, I completely wiped DOT off my cards, right? Now, before I even break down this analysis, we've got 65 people on the stream. We've got to crack 100, guys. Come on. I want to give away some cash. Drop comments, pump the likes. Let's get this going so I can give away you guys some money. But look at this. This here pumped 30%. This big green candle, I saw X light up like a Christmas tree, right? 36% in one day, from the bottom to the top. No one expected DOT. Tell me here, did anyone catch DOT? Did anyone expect DOT to run the way it did? Because, man, I've traded this coin a number of times and I've made some amazing gains. I've ripped 1,000% trades on this token, right? I have the proof. It's all on my socials. You can check it out. But as it stands currently, I'm looking at this because what's happened on DOT is it was consolidating, like we just spoke about on Solana, like we just spoke about on Link. It found the bottom of the range. It ripped a massive 36% candle in a day. I was able to identify the target of that using Fibonacci ratios, 261, held up, instantly rejected. It's now bouncing around the 1618. This is on the 4-hour time frame. Now, I'm looking at this. The reason I'm looking at this is I'm not here to chase the breakout once it occurs. Once it's gone, you're too late. All right. The best place to get that would have been at the bottom of this range here, which could have been identified if we were paying attention to DOT. However, I was not. So once this made its 36% move, I said, okay, we've got to put you back on the radar here, because this token, despite the fact it's not sexy, right? It's not a meme coin. It's not a degen coin. It's actually stepped up again. And I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at this consolidation that is taking effect currently off this 1618. Now, if I zoom in here and we look to the left, you can see this section. So we're going to mark that out. We're covering the bottom of these candles. We've got the 200 EMA and the 50 EMA from the on the 4-hour time frame. I'm looking at this point and going, all right, we've had this massive run. You always get a cool off. We've had the cool off. How deep could this potentially drop? Now, in this grand scheme of things, and I run my fib level from the bottom to the top. And look at that. We have the 50 fib level sitting in line with the 50 EMA, with the 200 EMA at the point in which price is consolidating. Now, I have not entered this trade, full transparency. It's something that I'm monitoring at the moment, because there might be for me an opportunity here to run this position if the rest of the market continues to gain momentum. Now, I'm very big on the fact that if one altcoin tanks, majority of them come along with it. So again, if I've already got 3 or 4 positions open, is it really smart for me to add a 5th? Is the other question you need to ask yourself, right? At the moment, for me, it's not. So I'm going to stick with the current positions I had. But I think looking at things like this is really important, because if you also talk about things like World Liberty Financial, when I was doing a stream, this thing ran a 30% in one hit. People start to FOMO. It's the first thing I got. Boom, can you look at World Liberty Financial? Instantly, World Liberty Financial is now down, and you can see it's only really up 3.5%. So just be conscious of the fact chasing big green candles doesn't typically end up quite in your favor. It means that you're basically FOMOing into the market. So to wrap that piece up, Bitcoin is really my main focus at the moment, whilst I'm also looking at these altcoins where they currently stand, and I'm starting to take positions. I'm starting to position myself for a risk-on environment that could very much occur quite fast, depending, in my experience, how the US market reacts tonight. I've already positioned myself from US oil ETFs that I purchased a couple of months ago. They're in the profit. There was other things that I jumped onto, but I closed out a lot of my stocks before this sort of took effect. I jumped into some oil stocks. I posted a couple of other things, jumped onto one last week, completely off topic, but on Netflix, and absolutely rocketed. But now I'm looking at Bitcoin of where it's at. And for me, I'm quite impressed in the grand scheme of things that despite what's happened, it is still held up. And I think that is something that majority of the market has actually discounted and is not really taken into consideration, because historically, when we see things like this happen, we see massive amounts wiped off the market, massive amounts wiped off Bitcoin, off altcoins. And the reality is they are in the exact same position today as what they were last week, despite the fact of everything else that has happened. Now, if you've got something otherwise, whack it in the chat. I want to have a quick look at the comments. I can see some funny emojis going on. I just want to have a quick look before we jump on to anything else. I've just got to move my screen because things are moving around everywhere here. Give me 1 second. There we go. I've got so many screens. Things are just everywhere. All right. Dot, Ada, forgot about it. Yep. I love it. I'm going long soon as well. Let's go. Shared on X. Guys, I appreciate the support. We might have to do some small giveaways on Wednesday, I reckon. If we don't hit 100, I'm still going to do something. I feel like for the supporters that have been here and have commented and liked and pumped this up, we're going to do something on Wednesday regardless. So make sure you guys are tuning in on Wednesday. I want to go through this with you all. And I want to continue to monitor this situation because, like I'm saying, I think overall the market's in not an extremely bad scenario. And I'm watching and focused on a lot of these accumulation patterns. I'm going to drop them on my X, these charts, then you guys can follow them along in your own terms. If you've got something else that you want to share, whack it in the comments on X, share it along. But I am quite focused on a number of these tokens. I'll give you guys one other one that I am focused on before I sort of jump off, because this one here is obviously a fan favorite. But I am watching XRP at the moment as well. I've been watching this coin for quite a while. It is still bubbling along the bottom here. You can see there's a 20% range in this. Again, this thing here, despite being a retail fan favorite, I'm very skeptical of where this is going at the moment because it's tried to pump out a number of times. It's failed. It hasn't really done much. So I'm just monitoring this one for the time being. But I am really focused on those really clear, to be very simple, these really, really clear accumulation phases that are taking effect at the bottom of the downtrends. Link, Solana. If you've got another one that you're monitoring, let me know. I'm looking at it on the others chart. You can see accumulating sideways. You can see the total chart accumulating sideways as well. And you can see here, I haven't shared this historically much, but the USDT dominance, I'm looking at this potentially, the bearish divergence kicking in and the fact of moving sideways as well. So on that note, guys, I am going to wrap it up. We've smashed it out for half an hour. Hope you guys enjoyed this session. Make sure you jump on Wednesday, regardless if we hit 100 or not. I'm going to do some giveaways. I feel bad. I want to give the supporters something. You guys have been great for the first 3 weeks of this stream. These will start to get more and more detailed, more and more insightful. As things start to pick up, we will start to run through more and more tokens. In the current scheme of things of where the market is at, I'm realistically more focused on a few specific tokens. Like I said, some large caps, Bitcoin in particular. We don't need to trade everything. I want to focus on the coins that I'm actually genuinely interested in versus going through everything in the market. And that's sort of way I'm positioning myself at the current point, because if this switches, I want to be positioned in a way that I can take full advantage of it, but equally protect my capital if need be. I'll wrap it up there. If you've got any questions, reach out. Otherwise, have a fantastic week. I'll see you all on Wednesday. See you later.